This is a throwback video. A couple of years ago, Dr. Umar talked to a young woman who resides in Australia. The conversation was very interesting, to say the least. Let's take a listen.
May I help you, young lady?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, and you're joining from where?
Australia.
Australia. I've never been to Australia. I'm waiting for my African family to invite me to Australia. May I ask you what brought you to Dr. Umar's live stream?
What brought me to your live stream?
Yes, ma'am. Because my live stream is usually only for African people, and you're not an African, so I was wondering what brought you to the live stream.
Well, I'm trying to be, brother. You know, like I'm doing a solarium. I'm trying to get as dark as I can, but it's just not natural. It's just not coming.
You're trying to get dark. May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Because although a lot of white women get suntan, they never want to be mistaken for a black woman. So can you help me understand that contradiction between wanting the suntan, but never wanting to be mistaken for an African sister?
Well, it's really interesting because they say don't go too black because you look dirty.
Humans with dark skin pigmentation have skin naturally rich in melanin, especially eumelanin, and have more melanosomes, which provide superior protection against the deleterious effects of ultraviolet radiation. This helps the body to retain its folate reserves and protects against damage to DNA. Skin color is determined by the amount of melanin in the skin, which is produced by melanocytes in the epidermis. People with darker skin have more eumelanin, a type of melanin that protects skin from ultraviolet UV damage.
Because we can't get the color that you get. Our pigmentation will never get to yours, to be the same as yours. Does that make sense?
Right. They said if you go too dark, you might get dirty, but are you aware that the original man and woman of this planet were blue-black? They were as black as midnight. That is the original natural color of humanity.
Lucy, a 3.2 million year old fossil skeleton of a human ancestor, was discovered in 1974 in Hadar, Ethiopia. The fossil locality at Hadar where the pieces of Lucy's skeleton were discovered is known to scientists as Afar Locality 288. There are many reasons why Lucy is so well known and well loved. To Ethiopians, she is a symbol of their country. Many African peoples are proud that Lucy comes from their homeland and represents to the world that Africa is the cradle of humankind. Lucy's Ethiopian name is Dinkanesh, which translates to, "You are marvelous." Peoples of the Afar region call Lucy, Hilomali, which means, she is special. At the time of Lucy's discovery, she was a shining star in the world of paleoanthropology. She was the oldest, most complete hominine skeleton ever discovered. She was evidence that bipedalism evolved before large modern human-sized brains evolved. And her discovery supported the scientific view that human evolution was a gradual process involving the appearance and survival of transitional forms over long periods of time.
Are you Christian?
I'm African.
Oh, what's your religious belief?
My religion is revolutionary Pan-Africanism.
As you come onto the page, kindly hit the like bell, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. Thank you.
Oh, cool. How do we do that? How do I get on board with that?
Well, you can't do that because you have to be an African to be a revolutionary Pan-African.
So that's why everyone's like, wow, why is there a white chick joining this? I think you're cool as man.
But let me ask you this. In Australia, I read that there's a lot of oppression against the Aboriginal Africans of Australia.
Fuck. Why would you talk like that?
Are you listening to my question?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. The Aboriginals of Australia, the original African people of Australia, I understand they suffer a lot of racism in Australia. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you done anything to try to address the racism against my people in Australia?
Aboriginal Australians are descendants of the first people to arrive in Australia, around 50,000 years ago. They are likely one of the oldest continuous populations outside of Africa. Culture. Aboriginal Australians have the oldest living culture on Earth. They share stories from the Dreamtime, when their spiritual ancestors created the world, through art, song, and storytelling. Lifestyle. Traditional Aboriginal people were hunter-gatherers who depended on the natural environment. They did not grow crops or domesticate animals, except for the dingo. Conflict. Aboriginal faced conflict with settlers over land, water, and resources. Many massacres took place, often after the theft of livestock. Aboriginal Australians are divided into two groups. Aboriginal peoples, who inhabited mainland Australia when Britain colonized the island in 1788, and Torres Strait Islanders, who are descendants of residents of the Torres Strait Islands. But the origins and fate of Australia's native peoples are still the subject of heated debates, ranging from social disparities to legal representation, and even whether their genocide can really be considered a genocide. Here's what you should know about these Indigenous people. Aboriginal Australians are split into two groups. Aboriginal peoples, who are related to those who already inhabited mainland Australia when Britain began colonizing the island in 1788, and Torres Strait Islanders, who descend from residents of the Torres Strait Islands, a group of islands that was annexed by Queensland, Australia in 1879. Legally, Aboriginal Australian is recognized as a person of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander descent who identifies as an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander and is accepted as such by the community. In 2017, a genetic study found that today's First Nations people are all related to a common group of ancestors, members of a distinct population that emerged on the mainland about 50,000 years ago. A current theory holds that those early migrants themselves came out of Africa about 70,000 years ago, which would make them the oldest population of humans living outside Africa. When British settlers began colonizing Australia in 1788, between 750,000 and 1.25 million Aboriginal Australians are estimated to have lived there. Soon, epidemics ravaged the island's Indigenous people, and British settlers seized their lands. Though some First Nations people did resist, up to 20,000 people died in violent conflict on the colony's frontiers. Most were subjugated by massacres and the impoverishment of their communities as British settlers seized their lands. Researchers have documented at least 270 massacres of Aboriginal Australians during Australia's first 140 years, and though the term genocide remains controversial, people related to the continent's first inhabitants are widely considered to have been wiped out through violence. Between 1910 and 1970, government policies of assimilation led to between 10 and 33% of Aboriginal Australian children being forcibly removed from their homes. These stolen generations were put in adoptive families and institutions and forbidden from speaking their native languages. Their names were often changed. Most First Nations people did not have full citizenship or voting rights until 1965. Only in 1967 did Australians vote that federal laws also would apply to Aboriginal Australians. This meant that Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders would be counted as part of Australia's population and that Australia could make laws they were obliged to obey. In 2008, Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd issued a national apology for the country's actions toward the stolen generations. Since then, Australia has worked to reduce the social disparities that Aboriginal Australians face. Today, Aboriginal Australians still struggle to retain their ancient culture and fight for recognition and restitution from the Australian government. In 2023, Australians overwhelmingly rejected a national referendum that would have both recognized Aboriginal people in its constitution and established an advisory group to weigh in on relevant issues in Parliament. Though a majority of Indigenous voters said yes to the proposal, more than 60% of Australians voted no on the measure. The referendum's failure was seen as a blow by many Aboriginal Australians, who proclaimed a week of silence and reflection on its wake. But progress is still underway on other fronts. Though Australia has never made a treaty with its First Nations residents, making it the only country in the British Commonwealth not to have ratified such a treaty, some Australian states are taking matters into their own hands. The state of Victoria has already established a framework for treaty negotiations, and is expected to broker a first-of-its-kind agreement that will recognise Aboriginal Australian sovereignty, compensate victims of historical injustices, and incorporate the findings of a truth-telling committee investigating the historic and modern disparities faced by First Nations people. The effort, Aboriginal historian and author Jackie Huggins told The Guardian, is an attempt to mend the very fabric of our society. Still, it will take more than a treaty to heal the deep wounds of Australia's colonial legacy. In the meantime, Aboriginal Australians say that whether the nation recognises it or not, They possess sovereignty that, in the words of the National Convention that called for the referendum, has never been ceded or extinguished.
So the Aborigines are waiting on the same thing that black people around the world are waiting on. And that includes Africa also. They're waiting on reparations.
Yeah, well, my whole street is pretty much full of, well, how do I say it? Well, they're not all African.
Well, if they look like me, they're African.
Well, there is some of them in my street.
Okay. So you live in a black neighborhood?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what brought you to that black neighborhood?
I just went there and there was a mosque there, so...
You said it's a mosque. You're Muslim?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Okay, Sunni or Shia?
Sunni.
Sunni. I was raised Muslim. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So you have a black boyfriend, I take it?
No, I don't, no.
Okay, good. We don't want you to have a black boyfriend. Because
why?
Because you are taking an eligible black man away from a black woman who needs to build a strong black family.
I got the impression that this young woman was looking for a male friend apart from her husband, and she was fixated on Dr. Umar, and he just shot her down. He dashed all her hopes when he said, "I'm glad you don't have a black boyfriend," and proceeded to tell her why.
That's not fair to say that.
No, it's not, because African people suffer the most in the world. And in order for us to repair ourselves, we have to build our family. We have to reconstruct the black family, and we can only do that with a black man, a woman, and child. So,
but why? That's not correct. I could, whatever cultural things that you follow as an African, I'm sure a white woman could follow them as well. Like,
here's the problem.
Yeah.
She couldn't, because the white woman benefits from a white privilege that she would never relinquish in order to support the black struggle. There has never been a white person ever who has given up white privilege to struggle with black people. They may have struggled with black people, but they never relinquished their privilege, which would make them a revolutionary hypocrite. Do you understand?
What are they giving up? What is it that they're not giving up?
The privilege. So, for example, with yourself, you have the privilege of not being racially profiled by the police. You have the privilege of not being denied
that's not correct at all.
Say again.
She's not. Why are people so mean? Why is everyone being so mean?
Don't worry about the comments.
They're so rude. People are just so rude and judgmental. Why don't they?
But you have to put the judgmentalism in context. We have over 1,000 years of direct contact with white people. And in that 1,000 years or more of direct contact with white people, African people have not been treated fairly. Would you agree with that?
I'm not aware of the statistics. But I could say that potentially yes. I could imagine that.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you are aware of the racism against the Aboriginals in Australia, correct?
Yes, but it is getting much better. My neighbour is Aboriginal and I love her.
Okay, so when you say the racism is getting better, can you give me 2 examples that will help me understand why you feel it's getting better? What has changed for the Aboriginals in Australia, my African brothers and sisters?
Well, for your African or for the Aboriginals?
It's the same thing. The Aboriginals are an African people.
Oh, okay. Well, pretty much like for childcare, family daycare centres. So we have like a family daycare centre, and we put we had someone come and do all Aboriginal like chalking at the front of the house. Putting all Aboriginal things inside the actual childcare centre. Like there's also a lady who comes to your house and she teaches the children how to play like the didgeridoo, those sorts of things, reads them books. They implement that a lot, and I love that. And especially even when my daughter goes to a oh my God, I cannot handle it.
So the comments were getting rough for this young woman. But we get to see, we get a glimpse of what some Caucasians think. Not all, but some. A lot of times, our African leaders always say black people out of slavery, out of bondage needs re-education. But guess what? A lot of these Caucasians need re-education also, because clearly she did not understand the plight of the Aborigines or the black nation. Let's continue.
These comments. People are so rude.
So let me push back a little bit.
So fucking rude.
Let me push back. The things you mentioned, the daycare, learning how to play the games, those things do not change status or the access to opportunity of
currently, but you were actually just racist because you turned around and said that a white woman would not be able to
marry a black man.
Yeah, but why?
Yeah, because it's not about hating you.
Yeah.
It's about building up ourselves. Do you understand?
Your cultural beliefs or your cultural needs or whatever it is culturally you need from a white woman, why could I not give that to you? How do you know that I wouldn't give that to you? How do you know that?
Because only the black woman, who is the oldest and most ancient of all females, can provide the oldest and most ancient of all males with the spiritual and psychological energy we need in order to reach God consciousness.
Well, have you tried that? Have you tried being with a white woman? Or has anyone tried?
Never, absolutely not.
Why? So then how could you say something if you haven't tried it? That contradicts everything that you're doing, because you're actually doing something all based on statistics. And now I'm saying to you, have you tried it? No.
The European is melanin deficient. You have a melanin deficiency.
Yeah.
That melanin deficiency affects your ability to reach higher states of spiritual growth. And so when I make love to my wife, when I reproduce with my wife, the two of us making love is an act of oneness. So in that moment, we are.
If you just talk about you making love with your wife online.
Well, listen to me. I'm not speaking of sex.
I know.
I'm speaking of
spiritual intimacy. Making love, same thing.
Well, I think it's appropriate.
Do you think you should appreciate that?
Listen to me. It's appropriate as long as you're not being vulgar, right? Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is, if I reproduce with a melanin deficient woman, that will restrict my ability to achieve God consciousness. See, the black man and woman are the oldest in the world. So we are the closest.
Be quiet. Can you please say something to these people? They're so nasty.
You have to understand.
It's 9:15 a.m. in Australia, and I have 2 children. So, yeah.
What is your nationality? May I ask?
I'm Scottish.
Scottish. I haven't been to Scotland. Okay.
Yeah.
How do the Scottish feel about black people?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. How do you feel about black people?
I love them.
You love them?
Not all of them. I'm scared of some of them because, some of them are a bit like crazy. But
some black people are crazy. In what way are they crazy?
Like some of them are not like the exact same as a white person.
Okay, so you're saying there's crazy blacks and crazy whites.
Yeah.
But is it possible that the whites made the blacks crazy?
Well, I don't see why not.
Okay. What will you teach your daughter to believe about black people?
We are equal.
Okay.
Don't
You
you
will honestly
dare
teach her
ever
that?
say a single word. Simple. We are equal.
Okay.
I will actually, because I'm Muslim, I would actually tell her that I believe, like we all come from dust. And
So you are a white Muslim, correct?
yeah,
Were you born into Islam or did you convert to Islam?
I converted to Islam.
How many years have you practiced Islam?
8 years.
8?
Yeah.
So your husband is Muslim.
So that's where the video cut off. She went dim in the background and the video cut off. But she said she had 3 children, and Benny asked her the question of her husband being Muslim. The video faded. In any event, I found the video to be very interesting. On that note, I'm over now. Don't forget to hit the like bell, share the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notification bell so you can be notified when I drop the next video. Thanks for watching.